So that's the fifth seal. Now the sixth seal then, when it's opened, is the ordination of the second coming. Now, Christ does not come in the sixth seal or at the end of the sixth seal. We've got a bunch of literature out that has never really done their homework in relation then to the prophetic events. Let me turn, for example, to section 77 again. And let's go back and pick up this picture from the prophet Joseph Smith. He's talking now here about the events to take place as depicted in Revelation chapter 8 and 9. Now, let me just fill you in beforehand. Revelation chapter 6 is an overview of the prophetic events of the last days, beginning then with the warfare against Zion, centering on the white horse, running it on through, and the sixth seal is the ordination of the second coming. And I emphasize the word ordination. Okay? Chapter 7 is a special spotlight scene, and we'll get to that after the break, that deals now with the calling of the 144,000 great high priests of the Holy Order, whose mission it will be to gather people into the church of the Firstborn, the sanctified church, the church prepared for the second coming of Christ. It's this church that's going to be caught up to meet Christ, and the 144,000 have that ministry. And then they do their work. They do their work in a period of 21 months, 21 years plus. After the opening of the seventh seal, there is silence in heaven, not on earth, in heaven, for the space of 1/2 hour, or about, it says 1/2 hour. 1/2 hour would put it in the Lord's time, 21 years. About indicates it can be a little more than that, you see. And it's during that period of time when the heavens look on with awe and silence that the 144,000 go forth in the earth. Their plagues, their judgments, and their ministry is to bring people into the church of the Firstborn. And then, immediately after that, the great cleansing plagues begin to take place. And there are 7 of them, and they're spoken of in the 8th and the 9th chapter of the book of Revelation. And let's read now what the prophet Joseph has to say about that. He says, when are the things to be accomplished which are written in the 9th chapter of Revelation? Now, the 8th chapter, verse 12, mentioned in the 8th. Well, his answer then basically is this. He says, they are to be accomplished after the opening of the 7th seal, before the coming of Christ. Now, is Christ going to come at the opening of the 7th seal in his great world appearance? And the answer is no. Why? Because these last great plagues and judgments that cleanse the wicked from the earth, and this is merely the parable of the wheat and the tares, the 144,000 gather the wheat. They gather them into the church of the Firstborn. That's the bin. And they organize them according to the holy order as the Lord revealed to Joseph Smith in section 86 of the Doctrine and Covenants. And then when they're gathered in, and the Lord comes to his temple, and the great Adam-on-Diamond Council is held in connection with that great gathering and its accomplishment, then the great plagues are poured out, and the wicked are cleansed from the earth. And this is spoken of then in Revelation chapter 8 and Revelation chapter 9. You see that? And in that sense, then, the prophet says these things are to be accomplished after the opening of the 7th seal, before the coming of Christ. So Christ doesn't come at the opening of the 7th seal. There's a 1/2 hour silence, and then there's plagues, and that's under the 6th plague that the wicked are gathered to Jerusalem for the great abomination of desolation. And the last stage of that period of things is 3.5 years. There's a longer period that leads into it, but the last stage of it will be a 3.5 year period of time. And then you'll have, after it then, the opening of the great 7th plague, as Christ stands then on the Mount of Olives, and the wicked are cleansed. But Christ doesn't come then until sometime way after the opening of the seventh seal. You see that? Now, when people put Adam on Diamond before the year 2000, they don't know the prophetic picture. When they put Christ coming to his temple before the year 2000, they don't know what they're doing. Now, we've got some literature out, and somehow someone got one to me somewhere that's all geared up with those great events in the 3.5 years now, somewhere in the 90s, and it's just a bunch of garbage. Leave it alone. Well, read it. If you can't separate the wheat from the chaff, go ahead and eat the chaff. Okay. Now, in that sense then, let's just conclude here, and then we'll take a little break. The book of Revelation, instead of one great chronological event, one after another, is actually a series of spotlights on the last days. John sees, for example, the four beasts and the elders. He sees the book, and that gives you orientation. He's seen the new heaven and the new earth. And then in Revelation chapter 6, he sees an overview. He sees the four beasts. He sees the wailings of the martyrs. And then he sees the second coming ordained under the sixth seal, but fulfilled in the seventh. It's like the creation. Man was ordained to be placed on earth on the sixth day. He was placed on earth, in actual fact, on the seventh day. Go read, for example, the book of Abraham and the book of Moses. The book of Abraham in particular makes it very, very clear that they came down to place man on earth. And then the sixth day terminates, and the seventh day ordained. But man is ordained to be put on the earth in the sixth day, and it's fulfilled in the seventh. Similarly, then you have the same kind of a situation. The second coming is ordained under the sixth seal, but it's fulfilled under the seventh seal. And then after that, then John sees this special spotlight of the 144,000. And then he sees chapter 8 and 9, which is the plagues. And then he sees chapter 10, which is a spotlight on himself, John the Revelator, with the little book that he's given, which is his ministry to gather the tribes of Israel. And then he sees another spotlight, and this is on the Jerusalem scene, the two prophets that are raised up in the period when the nations of the earth gather against Jerusalem in the great abomination of desolation. And then he sees chapter 12, and this is one of the most meaningful chapters. He sees the war in heaven, and it's a type and shadow of the warfare against Zion on earth. And we want to get to that, particularly from the inspired revision of the book of Revelation. And then he sees chapter 13, which is a portrayal of the two great beasts that make war, Babylon and the Assyrian, or the little horn, or the northern army. You see that? Then he sees chapter 14. And chapter 14 then gives us the count of the angel flying through the midst of heaven to restore the gospel. And it seems like it's all out of kilter. I mean, after all, you've talked about the two prophets in chapter 11, and you've talked about the two great powers in chapter 13, and then chapter 14 opens up, and you say that has to do with the restoration of the gospel, clear back here before the book of Revelation even gets into gear to be fulfilled. You see that? Now, why? Well, you hold on to that one, and there's a real reason why, and it's a very beautiful one, and we'll get to it. But right now, let's take a breather. The Lord bless us to take advantage of this if you can.